If you're about to add new fish to your cichlid tank, stop for a second, because this one small decision decides what your tank will look like for the next few months. Most people think adding fish is simple. You float the bag, open it, release the fish, and that's it. But that's not what really happens. Most tanks look calm from the outside, but calm doesn't mean safe. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to add new fish without losing them, what to change in your tank, what mistakes to avoid, and what actually matters during the first 24 hours. I've seen this go wrong so many times. I've lost fish this way too. Years ago, I made this exact mistake myself. What really starts happening the moment that new fish hits the water is something most people never notice. You start to see it slowly. One fish takes more space, another pulls back, one eats first while the other hesitates, and that's when you realize the balance is already changing. Most people lose fish because they miss one simple thing in that first day. I'll come back to that in a moment. From the outside, everything still looks quiet. No chasing, no fighting, maybe just a few slow passes. But inside the tank, something else is happening. I used to think this was just bad luck. I told myself the fish was weak. But after watching enough tanks, you realize it's almost never luck. Cichlid tanks don't run on kindness. They run on structure. Every established tank already has a system in place. There is always a dominant fish, even if you don't see it right away. There are middle fish trying to hold position, and there are suppressed fish quietly staying out of the way. Even in tanks where nobody fights, this structure still exists. You just don't notice it unless you know what to look for. And by the way, this is the part most pet shops never explain. They sell fish one by one because it sounds easy and it sounds safe, and it keeps the purchase simple. They don't stand there and say, "You're not buying a fish, you're poking a hierarchy," because that conversation doesn't fit at the counter. But this is exactly what determines whether your new fish settles in or quietly collapses over the next 2 days. So when a single new fish enters that system, it isn't joining empty water. It's walking into a room where everyone already knows their role. And this doesn't just apply to one type of fish. Whether you keep African cichlids, Malawi cichlids, peacocks, mbuna, or even American cichlids, the same thing happens when you add new fish to an established cichlid tank. The hierarchy shifts, pressure builds, and the newcomers have to survive that first critical window. Usually it doesn't start with aggression. It starts with awareness, a slow pass, a sideways glance, maybe a small change in swimming angle. That's inspection, and that's the moment the tank decides whether the newcomer belongs. The new fish feels it right away. Swimming becomes cautious, colors fade a little, breathing speeds up, and it starts looking for somewhere safe. But every hiding place already belongs to someone else, so it ends up drifting toward corners, heaters, and filter intakes. And this is where most owners say the same thing. It's shy. I hear that all the time. But that fish isn't shy. It just lost its first social battle. And once that happens, everything else starts lining up the same way it always does. I've watched this so many times. The dominant doesn't even need to chase. Just swimming past is enough. It blocks food lanes, controls space, and before long, the new fish starts missing meals. You'll see posture change, that slightly vertical stance appear, and gill movement speed up. Sometimes the fish just parks near the heater like it's trying to warm itself back to life. From outside the tank, it still looks peaceful. But inside, one fish is slowly breaking down. Usually within 24 to 72 hours, the immune system gives up. Sometimes the fish dies suddenly. Sometimes it fades over a few days. And the owner stands there confused, saying, "It was fine yesterday." But it wasn't. The collapse started the moment that fish entered alone. And here's the painful part. A lot of people are watching this video after they already did it. Maybe you added one fish yesterday. Maybe it's already hovering near the heater right now. Maybe it's sitting in the corner, breathing faster than normal, refusing food, looking calm only because it stopped moving. If that's you right now, don't panic, but don't ignore it either. This is where you can still save a fish, but only if you act like you understand what's happening. First, reduce pressure, dim the lights, break line of sight wherever you can, change how and where you feed. Give the stressed fish a real place to disappear, and don't be afraid to separate fish temporarily if that's what it takes to stop the pressure from running nonstop. Clean water matters too. A modest water change can ease stress and buy you time. The goal isn't to chase fish with nets all day. The goal is to reduce targeting and create a window where the newcomer can eat and breathe normally again. Now here's something most people don't realize. When you add 3, 4, or 5 fish at the same time, everything changes. Not because the fish suddenly become friendly, but because attention gets divided. Pressure spreads out. The dominant can't lock onto one target. Existing borders blur, and everyone has to renegotiate position. During that short window of confusion, survival chances go way up. Instead of one fish carrying all the stress, the experience gets shared. Instead of a clean hierarchy, you get temporary disorder, and that disorder saves lives. Groups survive, singles usually don't. Rocks become borders, feeding creates power, and those first 24 hours end up deciding whether a fish makes it or not. But even this only works when you help the tank reset. I've seen people add groups and still lose fish because they forgot this part. They release the newcomers, leave all the rocks exactly where they were, keep the lights bright, and immediately start feeding. That just preserves the old hierarchy. The tank never actually resets. Before releasing new fish, move a few rocks around and dim the lights. After they're in, don't feed for the first 12 hours, and when you do start feeding again, keep it light and spread food across different areas. Then step back and observe from a distance. Watch for things like corner parking, heater hovering, a vertical posture, or gills moving faster than normal. Those are your early warning signs that a fish is under real stress. Every tank ends up with its own feeding routes, patrol paths, and escape corridors, even if nobody ever explains that to you. When you angle your rock layout, you create real escape paths. Caves give stressed fish a place to reset for a moment, while flat open tanks leave weaker fish fully exposed. Without proper rock work, hiding slowly turns into corner parking. Corner parking turns into heater hovering, and heater hovering usually ends in collapse. Feeding plays into this too. Spread food around the tank, change where you drop it, and break predictable routines. You don't want to train one fish to own the surface while everyone else waits their turn. Once one fish starts controlling food, everything else follows naturally. That fish grows faster, gets bigger, gains confidence, and before long it's running the tank while someone else ends up hiding. And that hiding is usually where things start going downhill. It's all connected, and you control the very first step of that chain. Sometimes adding one fish does work, but it's rare. Usually only when the hierarchy is already weak, or when the newcomer immediately stands its ground. Most of the time, though, that's just gambling. That's not husbandry. Hope isn't a strategy here. Keeping cichlids alive long-term is really about managing pressure, maintaining balance, and understanding how the system inside your tank actually works. People look at a tank and think, it looks big. But for a dominant cichlid, gallons on paper don't matter nearly as much as distance and line of sight. In smaller tanks, one fish can cover the whole space with just a few slow laps, watching everything and returning to the same corners over and over. The pressure never really shuts off. In larger tanks, you finally get real separation and real blind spots, and that gives weaker fish a chance to break contact. In a fresh setup, everyone enters together. Nobody really owns anything yet, and roles take time to form. Aggression still happens, but it builds gradually. In an established tank, ownership is already there. Territory is already claimed, and the fish remember who belongs where. A new fish isn't a neighbor in that world, it's an intruder. That's why beginners often say, my first group was fine, but when I added more later, everything went wrong. And that isn't bad luck. That's just how structure works inside a cichlid tank. Between the first and sixth hour, the dominant fish usually starts approaching slowly. The middle ranks follow, and even though there's no biting yet, everyone is quietly testing each other. The new fish spends most of this time just trying to find somewhere safe. Then somewhere between 6 and 12 hours, you'll see the hierarchy begin to take shape. One fish eats first, another starts guarding a favorite rock, and someone always ends up backing down. By the time you reach that 12 to 24-hour window, silent pressure takes over. This is where most fish are lost, not in fights, but in corners, near heaters, holding a vertical posture, breathing faster than normal. This is the one simple thing most people miss. They expect danger to look like chasing. They wait for torn fins. But most of the damage comes from constant contact, constant targeting, and someone controlling space and food. A fish doesn't have to be bitten to be broken. If it can't eat, can't rest, and can't disappear for a moment, the body eventually gives up. Once you've made changes, give the tank time to settle. Stability after a reset matters more than people realize. Every setup is different, and every fish has its own personality, but the pressure patterns inside a cichlid tank are always the same. A hierarchy will form, someone will take control, and someone else will end up backing down. Your role as the keeper is to make sure that backing down doesn't turn into a slow collapse. And that brings us right back to the beginning. People lose fish and say, "I don't know what happened." But something always happened quietly inside that glass box. And I'll be honest, this is one of the hardest parts of the hobby because it doesn't look dramatic. A fish can be dying right in front of you while the tank looks fine. I've watched fish fade like that while the owner stood inches from the glass, waiting for a fight that never came. So next time you think about adding just one more fish, remember this: groups survive, singles usually don't. The way you place rocks creates borders, and the way you feed decides who gains power, and those first 24 hours end up deciding whether a fish makes it or not. Cichlids don't welcome newcomers, they test them, and in the end, your tank decides who makes it through. So before you add your next fish, make sure you understand the other side of the system too. What happens when tanks are overcrowded, how pressure builds differently, and why more fish doesn't always mean more balance. You'll see my overstocking video right now in the top right corner of your screen. Click it and I'll meet you there. Because Dark Cichlids isn't about noise, it's about systems, about rhythm, about understanding what fish experience beneath the surface. Knowledge swims deeper here. See you in the next dark video.